Welcome to Moon's Fairy Tales, where magic, mystery, and shadows intertwine. Today, we journey into Hawkins, inspired by the eerie world of Stranger Things. Follow Evelyn Parker as her return to her hometown leads her into a realm of danger and hidden secrets. Get ready for a tale of dark forces and intriguing mysteries that threaten all she holds dear. Sit back, embrace the chill, and let the veil of shadows captivate you. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more spellbinding stories. Now, let's step into the darkness and uncover what lies beyond the veil.
The Veil of Shadows, Part 1, The Whispering Woods. Evelyn Parker hadn't set foot in Hawkins in over 10 years. The memories of this small town were etched deep into her mind, a place she swore she would never return to. But here she was, stepping off the Greyhound bus with a duffel bag slung over her shoulder, her green eyes scanning the all-too-familiar streets. The sun was setting behind the woods, casting long shadows over Main Street, and she could feel the familiar chill in the air, the kind that crawled under your skin, whispering of things unseen. Her father's funeral had been small, just a few former colleagues from the police force and a couple of neighbors who barely remembered her. They offered her their condolences, but there was a look in their eyes that Evelyn couldn't shake, a mix of fear and pity. Her father, the once respected officer, had died in what they called a freak accident. But Evelyn knew better. She had read his final letter, hastily scribbled, full of panic and warnings. "The upside down is spreading, Evelyn. I saw it. It's real and it's here." She could still hear the crack in his voice when he left her that voicemail, rambling about shadows and a place called the Whispering Woods. She hadn't understood then, but now she felt it. Something was wrong. The townspeople avoided her gaze, whispering as she passed. Even old friends turned their backs. It was as if the entire town was gripped by an invisible hand, tightening around their throats, squeezing out any trace of joy or familiarity. As she walked to her father's house, a wave of unease settled over her. The house looked exactly as she remembered. Slightly run down, paint peeling from the wooden planks, and windows that seemed to look back at her. She hesitated at the door, her hand hovering over the knob. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay inside. The interior was dimly lit, dust particles dancing in the fading light that seeped through the curtains. The scent of old books and something else, something like damp earth, permeated the air. She flipped the switch, and a dull yellow light flickered on, illuminating the chaos that had consumed her father's life in his final days. Papers were strewn everywhere. Maps of Hawkins covered the walls, each marked with red circles, arrows pointing to the woods just beyond the town. The Whispering Woods, a name that sent a shiver down her spine. Nobody dared go there. The stories she'd heard as a child came rushing back. A haunted place where people disappeared, where the wind carried voices not of this world. She sorted through her father's notes, each page more frantic than the last, detailing sightings of creatures, descriptions of dark portals, and mentions of an expanding darkness. He had been investigating something, a connection between the Upside Down and these woods. The deeper she read, the more she felt a pull, a need to understand what had driven him to his death. "Come find me," she whispered to herself, mimicking the words he had written. There was something in her that stirred, a compulsion she couldn't explain. It wasn't just curiosity. It was as if the woods were calling to her. With a determined look, she grabbed a flashlight and headed out, following the winding road out of town, toward the edge of the forest. The sun dipped lower, and darkness began to blanket the landscape. The woods loomed ahead, the trees tall and foreboding, their branches twisting into each other like skeletal hands. Evelyn hesitated at the entrance. The path was overgrown, almost as if nature itself wanted to keep people away. She took a deep breath and stepped in. The air grew colder, each breath forming a mist before her. The further she walked, the quieter it became. No birds, no rustling of leaves, just the sound of her footsteps crunching on the underbrush. And then she heard it, a faint whisper. Her name, Evelyn. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. It was like the wind, but different. It was unmistakable. She shone her flashlight around, but there was nothing. She continued deeper, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Evelyn, come to us." They seemed to come from all directions, yet from nowhere at all. Her pulse quickened. Was she imagining it? She pushed on, driven by some force beyond her understanding, as if the woods themselves were guiding her to a secret they had long kept hidden. Then, through the dense foliage, she saw it. A dark opening in the side of a hill, a cave entrance shrouded in shadow. The air around it seemed to shimmer, vibrating with a strange, otherworldly energy. She approached cautiously, her flashlight flickering as if struggling against the darkness that oozed from within. The whispers grew louder now, a chorus of voices speaking in unison, chanting her name, beckoning her closer. She could feel the darkness pulling at her, like invisible hands, urging her forward. She took a step inside, and the temperature plummeted. Her breath came out in shaky gasps, forming small clouds in the freezing air. Inside the cave, the walls were covered in a strange, black substance, pulsating as if alive. The whispers were deafening now, echoing off the stone, and she felt a pressure in her head, a sensation like her skull was being squeezed. She stumbled forward, drawn by a force she couldn't resist. Then, she saw them, figures in the shadows moving just out of the light's reach. She swung her flashlight wildly, catching glimpses of grotesque shapes, twisted and malformed. Her heart raced, her instincts screaming at her to run, but her feet remained planted. Suddenly, a hand shot out from the darkness, grabbing her wrist with a grip like iron. She gasped, dropping the flashlight, plunging the cave into pitch blackness. The whispers turned into a roar, a cacophony of voices filling her mind, each one speaking a different language, yet somehow she understood them all. "Evelyn, you must come deeper." She struggled against the grip, her heart pounding in her ears, but the hand didn't relent. It began to pull her deeper into the cave, towards the darkness that seemed to consume all light. She fought to stay calm, her mind racing for a way out. But then she felt it, an overwhelming sense of familiarity, as if this was not the first time she had been here. Suddenly, the grip released, and she fell to the ground, gasping for breath. The whispers faded, replaced by a deep, resonant voice, one that seemed to come from within the very walls of the cave. "Welcome back, Evelyn." She scrambled for her flashlight, her hands shaking. When she finally turned it back on, the cave was empty. No figures, no black substance, just the cold, damp rock. But the feeling remained, the knowledge that she had been here before, and that something was waiting for her, deeper within. As she rose to her feet, she realized there was no turning back. The whispering woods had called her, and now she had to see this through. Whatever secrets they held, whatever her father had discovered, she would find it, and she would face it no matter the cost. Part 2, The Shadow Hunter. The cave felt like a living thing around her, breathing in the darkness. The silence was thick, oppressive, and each step Evelyn took seemed to echo for miles. The shadows danced along the walls, shifting like restless phantoms. Her flashlight flickered, the bulb struggling against the oppressive gloom that seemed to swallow the light whole. And then, out of the silence, she heard it. A low growl, rumbling like thunder from deep within the cave. Her heart froze. She turned, sweeping the flashlight in a wide arc. First, there was nothing, but then she saw them, eyes, glowing an unnatural red, reflecting the light like mirrors in the dark. She stumbled back, her breath catching in her throat. A shape began to materialize from the shadows, a hulking figure with twisted limbs and a grotesque, elongated face. Its skin was a mottled, sickly gray, like something pulled from the depths of a nightmare, a creature from the upside down. Evelyn's mind screamed at her to run, but her body was frozen in place. The creature moved closer, its breath a hot, rancid wind that washed over her. She could feel the ground tremble beneath its weight. It reared back, letting out a guttural roar that shook the very walls of the cave. She turned to flee, but it was too fast. A massive clawed hand swung down, knocking her to the ground. Pain exploded through her body as she hit the cold, hard stone. She struggled to her feet, her vision blurred, the creature looming over her, ready to strike again. Then, out of nowhere, a blinding light erupted from behind her, followed by a loud, commanding voice. "Get down!" Evelyn didn't have time to react. A shot rang out, and the creature let out a screech of pain, stumbling back into the darkness. A figure stepped into the light, holding a crossbow in one hand and a flashlight in the other. He was tall, with a lean, muscular build, his face half hidden beneath a hood. His eyes were sharp, focused, and his presence exuded a confidence that made Evelyn's fear momentarily subside. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. Evelyn nodded, still in shock. Who are you?" she managed to stammer. "Lucas Hale," he replied, keeping his eyes on the shadows where the creature had disappeared. "I'm a shadow hunter." Before she could ask what that meant, the creature charged again, roaring with fury. Lucas fired another bolt, hitting it square in the chest. The beast let out a pained howl and collapsed to the ground, twitching before going still. Lucas didn't relax. He moved cautiously towards the creature, keeping his weapon trained on it, ready to fire again if needed. After a tense moment, he nodded to himself, satisfied that it was truly dead. He turned back to Evelyn, his expression stern. "What the hell are you doing out here?" Evelyn was still catching her breath, her heart pounding. I was looking for something. My father, he was investigating these woods. I needed to know why." Lucas's eyes narrowed. "Your father? Who was he?" "James Parker. He was a cop here in Hawkins." Lucas's expression softened slightly. "Parker, yeah, I heard about him. He was onto something. Got too close." He glanced around the cave, as if expecting more creatures to emerge from the darkness. "And now you're here, poking around in things you don't understand." Evelyn bristled. "I'm not poking around. I'm trying to find out what happened to him. Why he died." Lucas interrupted, his tone blunt. "He died because this place," he gestured to the cave, to the woods beyond, "is tainted. The upside down is seeping into our world, and it's bringing all kinds of monsters with it. Creatures like that." He nodded towards the dead beast. "And worse." Evelyn's eyes widened. "The upside down. It's expanding?" Lucas nodded grimly. "Yeah, the barrier between our worlds is weakening. That's why I'm here, to hunt down anything that slips through and send it back. But it's getting worse. More and more creatures are coming through, and I'm starting to think maybe someone's letting them in." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. Letting them in? But who would? She stopped short, a sudden, disturbing image flashing in her mind. A figure shrouded in darkness, its face hidden beneath a hood, standing at the edge of a chasm, a twisted grin on its lips. The Whisperer. The image was so vivid, so real, she almost gasped. "What is it?" Lucas asked, noticing her sudden change in demeanor. Evelyn shook her head, trying to clear the vision. I've been seeing things. The figure. I think it's controlling them. The creatures." Lucas's eyes darkened. "The Whisperer." His voice was barely more than a whisper itself. "Yeah, I've heard the stories. Some say he's the one pulling the strings, commanding the creatures of the upside down. If he's real and if he's here." He trailed off, his expression becoming more determined. "We need to find him. Stop him." Evelyn felt a surge of fear, but also something else, resolve. "Then we do it together," she said firmly. "I'm not going anywhere. If my father was onto something, if he died because of this, I need to see it through." Lucas hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you follow my lead. This isn't a game. One wrong move and you're dead." Evelyn nodded. "Deal." They moved deeper into the woods, the night growing darker around them. The alliance between them was uneasy, filled with mistrust and unspoken questions, but it was a start. They both knew that they would need each other for what was to come, for whatever lurked in the shadows of Hawkins and beyond. As they pressed on, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the eyes of the Whisperer were on them, tracking their every move. And in the silence of the forest, she could still hear the faintest of whispers, calling her name, drawing her deeper into the darkness. Part 3: The Haunted Past. Evelyn and Lucas trudged back to her father's house in silence, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpet of fallen leaves. The woods around them seemed darker now, more alive, as if the shadows themselves were watching. The encounter with the creature and the revelation of the Whisperer had left Evelyn's mind spinning. Questions buzzed around her head like angry wasps, each one more unsettling than the last. When they finally reached the house, Evelyn pushed the door open and stepped inside, the familiar scent of dust and damp earth washing over her. Lucas followed close behind, his eyes scanning the room with a wary alertness, as if expecting another creature to leap from the shadows. Evelyn moved toward her father's cluttered desk, a sense of purpose building within her. "There's something here," she murmured, more to herself than to Lucas. "Something I'm missing." She began rifling through the papers, searching for any clue, any hint that might explain why her father had been so obsessed with the Upside Down. Lucas leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching her. "You sure this is a good idea?" he asked. "Digging into your old man's secrets? Might be better to just let sleeping dogs lie." Evelyn shot him a look. "If my father was onto something that got him killed, I need to know what it was. I'm not going to just walk away." He shrugged, but didn't argue. She continued her search, pushing aside old maps and notes until her hand brushed against something cold and metallic. She pulled out a small, leather-bound book, the cover worn and faded. Her heart skipped a beat as she recognized it, her father's diary. She opened it carefully, the pages brittle with age. The entries were written in her father's familiar scrawl, each word heavy with tension and fear. As she read, a story began to unfold. A story she had never known, one that painted a very different picture of the man she thought she knew. October 15th, 1986. They're calling it the Sanguine Circle. A group of them, scientists, military officers, even some local politicians. They believe they can harness the power of the Upside Down. They think they can control it. Fools. They don't know what they're dealing with. They don't understand the darkness they're inviting into our world. Evelyn's hands trembled as she turned the page. More entries followed, each more frantic than the last. Her father had discovered that the group was conducting experiments, trying to open portals to the Upside Down. They believed the creatures and the energy from the other dimension could be used as weapons, tools to gain power and control. November 3rd, 1986. They've started experimenting on children. God help me, they're using kids to test their theories. They think children have some kind of connection, some latent ability to tap into the Upside Down. I tried to stop them, but they're too powerful. They have connections everywhere. They won't listen to reason. I have to find proof. I have to stop them. Evelyn felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. Children, experiments. The words seemed to echo in her mind, bringing with them a flood of half-formed memories. Sterile white rooms, the hum of machinery, and voices, always whispering, just beyond her understanding. And then she found it, an entry dated a few months later, in shaky handwriting, as if written in haste. February 28, 1987. They know about Evelyn. They know she's different. I have to hide her. I have to keep her safe. If they find out what she can do, if they find out she's connected. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. Connected? She stared at the words, her mind racing. She had always known there was something strange about her childhood, something her father never talked about. But this was something else entirely. She glanced up at Lucas, who was watching her intently. "What is it?" he asked, his voice cautious. Evelyn swallowed hard, her fingers tracing the lines of her father's writing. He knew. she whispered. He knew about the experiments. He knew they were looking for children with abilities. Like me. Lucas's eyes narrowed. Abilities? What are you talking about? Evelyn shook her head. I don't know. I don't remember. But I think I was there. At the lab. When I was a kid. She closed her eyes, trying to piece together the fragmented images in her mind. I keep seeing visions. A girl in a lab coat. Machines. The upside down. And this figure. The Whisperer. Lucas took a step closer, his expression unreadable. You're saying you have a connection to the upside down? That you've been there? Evelyn nodded slowly. I don't know how or why, but yes, I think I've been connected to it my whole life. Lucas's face darkened. That's dangerous, Evelyn. If what you're saying is true, then you're a target. The Whisperer, the Sanguine Circle, they'll come for you. They won't stop. A heavy silence settled between them. Evelyn could see the concern in Lucas's eyes, but there was something else too, something he wasn't saying. You know something, she said quietly, watching his reaction. Something about all of this. About me. Lucas hesitated, his jaw tightening. I know that you're not the only one with secrets. Evelyn felt a surge of frustration. What do you mean? Are you hiding something from me? Lucas? He looked away, his expression conflicted. I've been hunting these things for a long time, and I've seen things that don't make sense. People with abilities like you, but they're all gone now. Taken, or worse. Evelyn's eyes widened. You think I'm like them? That I have powers? Lucas met her gaze, his eyes hard. I think you're connected to this in ways you don't understand, and that makes you both valuable and dangerous. Evelyn's mind raced. The diary, the visions, the Whisperer. It was all connected, and somehow she was at the center of it. But why? What did the Sanguine Circle want with her? And what had they done to her all those years ago? She felt a sudden wave of dizziness, and the room seemed to spin around her. She closed her eyes, and in an instant, she was somewhere else. A cold, sterile room filled with machines and tubes. She was strapped to a chair, her wrists bound, her head pounding with a sharp, searing pain. Voices filled her ears, muffled and distorted, and in the corner of the room, she saw him, the Whisperer, watching her with cold, unfeeling eyes. She gasped, snapping back to reality. Lucas was at her side, gripping her shoulders. Evelyn, what did you see? She shook her head, trying to steady herself. I saw the lab. They were doing something to me. And the Whisperer, he was there, watching. Lucas's face was grim. We need to find that lab. If there are answers, that's where we'll find them. Evelyn nodded, a sense of determination settling over her. And if we find it, maybe we'll find out what they did to me, and why. Lucas hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All right, but we need to be careful. The Sanguine Circle is still out there, and they're not going to let us walk in and take their secrets. And there's still the matter of the Whisperer and what he wants. Evelyn took a deep breath, her mind racing. She didn't trust Lucas completely, but she knew they needed each other. For now, their goals were aligned. As they prepared to leave, Evelyn couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the shadows themselves were alive with unseen eyes. The paranoia grew, gnawing at her, but she pushed it down. There would be time for fear later. For now, she had a mission. She had to find the truth about her father, about the experiments, and about herself. And somewhere, in the dark corners of her mind, she could still hear the faint, haunting whispers of the Whisperer, calling her deeper into the darkness. Part 4. The Labyrinth of Fear. The house was silent, except for the low crackle of the fire in the hearth. Evelyn sat across from Lucas, her mind still reeling from the revelations of the past few days. Everything she thought she knew about herself, about her father, even about Hawkins, had been turned upside down. And now Lucas was telling her there was more. The upside down isn't just some alternate dimension, Lucas said, his voice low and urgent. It has a structure, a core, a place where its power is concentrated. I've been there. I've seen it. They call it the Heart of Darkness. Evelyn frowned. The heart of darkness? Sounds like something out of a horror movie. Lucas nodded. It's more than that. It's a living entity. It controls the flow of energy between the upside down and our world. If we can find it, if we can destroy it, we might be able to close the portals for good. But it's not going to be easy. We need a map, a specific map known as the Map of Nightmares. It's the only way to navigate the paths that lead to the heart. Evelyn leaned forward, her interest piqued despite herself. Where is this map? Lucas hesitated, then spoke. There's an old library on the outskirts of Hawkins. It was abandoned years ago, after the first incidents with the Upside Down. But I've heard rumors that the map is hidden there. Problem is, it's not just abandoned, it's haunted. Creatures from the Upside Down have made it their nest. No one's been able to get inside and live to tell about it. A shiver ran down Evelyn's spine. Haunted by what exactly? Lucas's face darkened. They call them the Wraiths. Shadows that can take any form, mimic any sound. They feed on fear, and they're drawn to those who have a connection to the Upside Down. Like you. Evelyn felt a chill settle over her. So you want us to just waltz into this haunted library, find a map that may or may not exist, and then what? Take on the heart of darkness itself. Lucas's eyes met hers, his gaze steady. It's the only way, Evelyn. If we don't do this, the barriers will keep breaking down. More creatures will come through, and eventually, the Whisperer. The Whisperer. The name alone sent a ripple of fear through her. She hadn't told Lucas everything she had seen in her visions, hadn't shared the truth about the Whisperer's identity, that he was or had once been her brother. Her missing, presumed dead brother, twisted and corrupted by the Upside Down. But how could she tell Lucas that when she barely understood it herself? She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. All right, she said finally. We'll go. But if things get too dangerous, we pull back. Agreed. Lucas nodded. Agreed. They set out at dawn, the air crisp and cold as they made their way through the woods toward the old library. The building loomed in the distance, its crumbling facade half hidden by overgrown vines and shadowed trees. As they drew closer, Evelyn could feel a strange energy in the air, a tension that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end. Stay close, Lucas whispered as they approached the entrance. And whatever you do, don't listen to them. The Wraiths will try to confuse you, make you see things that aren't real. Evelyn nodded, gripping her flashlight tightly. The doors to the library creaked open, and a wave of cold, musty air washed over them. They stepped inside, and the darkness swallowed them whole. The interior was a maze of towering bookshelves and decaying furniture, the floor littered with broken glass and debris. Evelyn's footsteps echoed eerily as she moved, her flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. She could hear faint whispers all around her, soft and indistinct, like the rustling of leaves in the wind. This way, Lucas whispered, leading her deeper into the maze. The map should be in the back, near the old archives. As they moved, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Evelyn tried to ignore them, but they seemed to be calling her name, beckoning her deeper into the shadows. She tightened her grip on the flashlight, her heart pounding in her chest. Suddenly, a figure appeared in front of her. A small boy, his face pale and ghostly in the dim light. "Evelyn," he whispered, his voice echoing through the empty space. "Help me, Evelyn, please." Evelyn froze, her breath catching in her throat. She recognized the boy, her brother, just as he had been before he disappeared all those years ago. "David?" she whispered, taking a step forward. "Evelyn, no." Lucas's voice cut through the darkness, snapping her back to reality. She turned to see him standing a few feet away, his face tense with worry. "It's not real. Remember what I said." Evelyn blinked, and the boy was gone, replaced by a shifting shadow that melted back into the darkness. She shook her head, trying to clear the image from her mind. "I'm fine," she muttered, though her heart was still racing. "Let's keep going." They pressed on, moving deeper into the labyrinth of shelves and shadows. The whispers continued, growing louder and more frantic with every step. Evelyn could feel her fear mounting, threatening to overwhelm her. But she forced herself to focus on the task at hand. They had to find the map. They had to stop the Whisperer. Finally, they reached the back of the library, where a heavy iron door stood ajar. Lucas pushed it open, revealing a small, dimly lit room lined with dusty shelves. In the center of the room, on a pedestal, lay a large, leather-bound book. "The Map of Nightmares," Lucas breathed, stepping forward. "We found it." Evelyn approached cautiously, her eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. She reached out and touched the book, feeling a strange warmth emanating from it. As she opened it, she saw that the pages were filled with strange symbols and markings, like a map of some twisted, alien landscape. Suddenly, the room seemed to shift, the walls closing in around them. The whispers rose to a deafening crescendo, and Evelyn felt a sharp pain in her head, as if something were clawing at her mind. "Evelyn!" A voice hissed, low and insidious. "You cannot escape me. You cannot escape the darkness within you." She looked up to see the Whisperer standing before her, his hooded figure looming over her like a shadow. His eyes glowed with a cold, malevolent light, and his voice was like ice in her veins. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You're not real. You're not my brother." The Whisperer laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed through the room. "Oh, but I am Evelyn. I am your brother, and I am so much more. I am the darkness that lives inside you, the fear that controls you. You cannot escape me. You cannot fight me." Evelyn felt a surge of anger, her fear melting away in the face of the Whisperer's taunts. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice steady. "You don't control me. Not anymore." The Whisperer's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Evelyn thought she saw a flicker of doubt. But then his expression hardened, and he raised his hand, a bolt of dark energy crackling in his palm. "You will join me, Evelyn," he hissed, "or you will die." Before she could react, Lucas lunged forward, tackling the Whisperer to the ground. "Go, Evelyn!" he shouted. "Get the map and get out of here." Evelyn grabbed the book and turned to run, her heart pounding in her chest. She could hear the sounds of struggle behind her, but she didn't look back. She knew that if she did, she would be lost. She sprinted through the darkened halls, the whispers still echoing in her ears. She could see the exit ahead, a faint glimmer of light in the darkness. She pushed herself harder, her legs burning with effort. Just as she reached the door, a figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking her path. It was Lucas, his face twisted into a cruel smile. "Lucas?" she gasped, skidding to a halt. "What are you? You think you can trust him?" The figure sneered, its voice shifting, warping into something inhuman. "You think he's here to help you? He has his own agenda, Evelyn. He doesn't care about you. He only cares about himself." Evelyn's mind raced. Was it another trick? Another illusion? She took a step back, her grip tightening on the book. "Get out of my way," she said, her voice low and dangerous. The figure laughed, its form flickering. "Ha ha 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 ha."
Echoes of a lost childhood. The abandoned laboratory. The room was dimly lit by the flickering of a single, bare light bulb. Evelyn Parker stood at the entrance of an old, dusty laboratory, her young heart pounding with a mix of curiosity and fear. The walls were lined with rusting equipment and dusty shelves, a stark contrast to the sterile, white room she remembered from her fragmented memories. It was a place she had seen only in her dreams, dreams that had always left her feeling unsettled and confused. But now, standing in the doorway of this abandoned lab, she felt a strange sense of familiarity, as if she were returning to a place she had once known well. She was only 8 years old, her dark hair tied in a messy ponytail, her wide eyes filled with a mix of awe and apprehension. The scent of old paper and chemicals hung heavy in the air, mixing with the mustiness of neglect. She took a hesitant step inside, her small feet shuffling across the cracked linoleum floor. The room was eerily silent except for the occasional creak of the old building settling. Evelyn's gaze was drawn to a large, metal cabinet in the corner. Its doors were slightly ajar, revealing a collection of old documents and files. Drawn by an inexplicable pull, she moved toward it, her fingers brushing against the cool metal. As she opened the cabinet, a stack of files tumbled out, scattering across the floor. Evelyn picked up one of the documents, its edges worn and yellowed with age. The title read, Project Catalyst, Subject 47. Her young mind couldn't fully grasp the significance of the words, but the name, Subject 47, made her shiver. Suddenly, the room seemed to shift, the air growing colder. Evelyn looked around, her eyes landing on a large, reinforced door at the back of the lab. The door was partially open, revealing a glimpse of what lay beyond, a darkened hallway, its ends swallowed by shadows. With a mix of trepidation and determination, Evelyn made her way to the door. As she approached, a low, resonant hum began to fill the air, vibrating through the walls and floor. Her heart raced, her small hands trembling as she pushed the door open further. The hallway was lined with more doors, each one slightly ajar. She could hear faint sounds emanating from within, whispers, soft and almost musical, as if calling her to come closer. Her steps were tentative as she moved down the corridor, the whispers growing louder with each step. She stopped in front of one door, its nameplate barely visible through the grime. She hesitated, then slowly pushed it open. Inside was a small, sterile room, its walls lined with strange, mechanical devices. In the center of the room stood a large, glass observation chamber. Inside the chamber, Evelyn saw a young girl, her face obscured by shadows. The girl looked almost like a reflection of herself, but older, with a look of deep sadness in her eyes. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat as she realized that this girl was connected to her, somehow. The hum of machinery grew louder, and the glass chamber began to glow with a faint, eerie light. Evelyn could see the girl inside reaching out, her hand pressed against the glass as if trying to make contact. The sight was both haunting and heartbreaking. Suddenly, the chamber's lights flickered, and a low voice echoed through the room. Subject 47, Initiate Phase 1. The voice was cold and clinical, devoid of emotion. Evelyn stepped back, her heart pounding in her chest. She turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her. She was trapped. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with a cacophony of sound. Evelyn, the whispers called, a mixture of her own voice and others, distorted and haunting. You must remember. You must understand. As the darkness closed in, Evelyn's vision blurred, and she felt a sharp, piercing pain in her head. She clutched at her temples, trying to make sense of the fragmented memories and voices swirling around her. In the midst of the chaos, she caught a glimpse of the girl in the chamber, her eyes wide with terror. Then, as suddenly as it began, the darkness receded. Evelyn found herself back in the abandoned lab, the light bulb flickering overhead. She was alone, her breathing ragged, her mind reeling from the intense experience. The door to the lab creaked open, and Evelyn saw her father standing in the doorway, his face a mix of relief and concern. "Evelyn, what are you doing here?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Evelyn stared at him, her eyes wide and tearful. I saw a girl. She looked like me. And there were voices, they were trying to tell me something." Her father's expression softened, but there was a shadow of sadness in his eyes. "It's okay, Evelyn. Let's get you out of here." As they left the lab, Evelyn glanced back one last time. The whispers still echoed in her ears, a haunting reminder of the secrets hidden in the shadows of her past.
Part 5, The Descent into Madness. Evelyn and Lucas stood at the edge of the dark, swirling portal that had materialized in the depths of the Whispering Woods. The air crackled with a palpable energy, and a cold, unsettling wind whispered through the trees. The portal's surface shimmered with an otherworldly light, casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. "Are you ready?" Lucas's voice was steady but carried an undertone of unease. Evelyn nodded, her expression resolute. "As ready as I'll ever be." Hand in hand, they stepped through the portal and were instantly engulfed by darkness. The sensation was like falling through an endless void, the air thick with a suffocating pressure. Then, with a sudden jolt, they were thrust into the heart of the Upside Down. The world around them was a grotesque reflection of their own, twisted and malformed. The sky was a swirling mass of dark clouds and roiling shadows, and the ground beneath their feet was a tangled mess of roots and cracked earth. The air was filled with the cacophony of distant, unearthly screams and the stench of decay. "We need to find the heart of darkness," Lucas shouted over the din, his voice barely audible. "It should be somewhere in the center of this place." Evelyn glanced around, her heart pounding. The environment was disorienting, with shifting landscapes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Every step they took was met with the sight of grotesque creatures lurking in the shadows, twisted forms with eyes that glowed with malevolent intent. "Watch out!" Lucas yelled as a grotesque beast lunged from the darkness. Evelyn barely had time to react before Lucas fired a shot from his weapon, the creature collapsing into a writhing pile of shadows. They pressed on, fighting their way through hordes of nightmarish entities. Each encounter was more harrowing than the last, their path strewn with the remnants of those who had ventured into the Upside Down before them. The very air seemed to press in on them, amplifying their fears and amplifying their doubts. As they ventured deeper, Evelyn felt the fabric of reality begin to warp and tear. Her surroundings shifted and twisted, the boundaries between the Upside Down and her own fears becoming indistinguishable. The forest morphed into a labyrinth of shifting corridors and darkened corners, each turn revealing a new, horrifying vision of her deepest nightmares. Finally, they arrived at the heart of darkness. It was a vast, cavernous chamber filled with a swirling vortex of dark energy, its center pulsating with a sickly, glowing light. Shadows writhed and danced around the core, forming an army of twisted shapes that seemed to be both part of and apart from the darkness itself. And there, standing before the heart, was the Whisperer. His hooded figure loomed with a terrifying, oppressive presence, his eyes glowing with an icy malevolence. Beside him stood an army of shadows, their forms shifting and writhing as if alive. "Welcome." The Whisperer's voice echoed through the chamber, a chilling, distorted sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. "I've been expecting you, Evelyn Parker." Evelyn's heart sank as she looked at him. The Whisperer's presence was more overwhelming than she had ever imagined, and his voice carried an unsettling familiarity. Her fears and doubts surged within her, and she felt a powerful urge to retreat. "You've come seeking to destroy the heart of darkness," the Whisperer continued. "But what if I offered you something more? What if I could give you the chance to rewrite your past, to reclaim what you've lost?" The temptation was almost unbearable. Evelyn saw fleeting visions of her past, moments with her family, her childhood, her missing brother. The heart of darkness seemed to promise her the power to change it all, to undo the pain and the loss. "Don't listen to him," Lucas shouted, his voice breaking through the haze of temptation. "It's a trap. The heart of darkness feeds on our fears and desires. It's trying to turn you against us." Evelyn hesitated, the weight of her emotions nearly overwhelming her. The promise of a different reality was so alluring, so tempting. But she forced herself to focus, to remember why she was here, to remember the lives that depended on her success. "No," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I can't give in. I won't let you control me." The Whisperer's expression darkened, his eyes narrowing with fury. You're a fool, Evelyn. The darkness within you will never be vanquished. You cannot resist forever. As the Whisperer advanced, his shadows reaching out with malevolent intent, Evelyn and Lucas prepared for the final confrontation. Evelyn's resolve hardened. She had come too far to back down now. They would face the darkness together, no matter the cost. The final battle loomed ahead, the fate of both worlds hanging in the balance. Part 6. The final confrontation. The cavern reverberated with a haunting energy as Evelyn and Lucas prepared for the climactic battle. The heart of darkness pulsed with a dark, ominous glow, its rhythmic beat echoing through the chamber. Shadows writhed around them, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to pulse with a malevolent consciousness. You cannot win, Evelyn, the Whisperer intoned, his voice a chilling whisper that seemed to come from all directions at once. The darkness within you will always prevail. Evelyn gritted her teeth, her gaze locked on the Whisperer. His shadowy form seemed to shift and distort, his eyes glowing with an icy, otherworldly light. She could feel her own fears and doubts swirling within her, manifesting as dark specters that clawed at her mind. You're wrong, Evelyn said, her voice filled with determination. I am more than the darkness. I will not let you control me. As she spoke, she felt a surge of power rising within her. The heart of darkness seemed to react, its pulse intensifying, and the shadows around her grew more aggressive. Evelyn's own fears took form, twisting into nightmarish visions of her past and the unresolved pain she had carried with her. The Whisperer advanced, his form shifting and writhing, a grotesque amalgamation of darkness and despair. Evelyn fought against the shadows that emerged from within her own mind, her movements a blend of desperation and fierce resolve. Lucas, meanwhile, was engaged in his own battle, trying to hold back the advancing army of shadows. He fired his weapon, each shot a desperate attempt to keep the dark entities at bay. But even with his skills, he could barely make a dent in the seemingly endless horde. In the midst of the chaos, Lucas took a deep breath and stepped forward, his expression grim. Evelyn, there's something you need to know. I wasn't just sent to help you. I was sent to ensure the heart of darkness was never destroyed. Evelyn's eyes widened in shock. What? Why? Lucas's face was a mask of sorrow and regret. An ancient entity, beyond our understanding, seeks to harness the power of the heart. If it's destroyed, the balance of power will shift, and the entity could unleash untold chaos upon our world. The revelation hit Evelyn like a blow. The stakes were even higher than she had imagined. The fate of Hawkins, and possibly the entire world, hinged on her next decision. So what am I supposed to do? Evelyn asked, her voice trembling with uncertainty. Sacrifice Hawkins to save the world, or destroy the Upside Down and face an uncertain future? Lucas's eyes were filled with a mixture of resignation and hope. I can't make that choice for you, but know this, whatever you decide will have consequences far beyond what we can foresee. Evelyn looked around at the devastation and chaos. The battle was reaching its zenith, and she could see the weight of the decision she had to make. The Whisperer's taunts grew louder, the shadows around him intensifying. Her resolve was tested with every passing moment, and the weight of her choice felt almost unbearable. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn stepped forward, her heart pounding. She knew that her decision would shape the fate of not only her world, but also the darker forces that threatened it. I've made my choice, she said firmly, her voice echoing with a newfound determination. I will destroy the heart of darkness. With a final surge of energy, Evelyn reached out toward the heart of darkness, her hands glowing with a blinding light. The heart pulsed violently, as if trying to resist her touch. Shadows writhed and screamed as they tried to pull her back, but Evelyn's resolve was unshakable. The chamber erupted into a cacophony of sound and light. The heart of darkness began to collapse in on itself, the dark energy swirling into a vortex of blinding light. The Whisperer's form twisted and shrieked in agony as the very essence of the Upside Down was torn apart. Lucas struggled to maintain his footing, the shadows around him growing more chaotic. He glanced at Evelyn, his face a mixture of hope and despair. You've done it, Evelyn, but we need to get out of here now. Evelyn, her energy nearly spent, nodded. She and Lucas raced toward the portal that had begun to form amidst the collapsing chamber. The ground shook, and the very fabric of reality seemed to tear apart around them. As they stumbled through the portal, the light of the Upside Down was replaced by the familiar darkness of the Whispering Woods. They emerged, breathless and battered, the forest eerily silent around them. The portal behind them closed with a final, resounding crack, sealing the darkness away. "Is it over?" Evelyn asked, her voice barely a whisper. Lucas nodded, his expression exhausted. "For now, the heart of darkness is destroyed, and the Upside Down is sealed. But the consequences of our actions will be felt for a long time." Evelyn looked at the forest, her heart heavy with the weight of what they had done. The battle had been won, but at what cost? Hawkins was safe, but the future remained uncertain. "We did what we had to do," she said softly, "but the scars of this fight will linger for a long time." As they made their way back to the town, the first light of dawn began to break through the trees. It was a new beginning, but also a reminder of the darkness they had faced and the cost of their victory. Part 7, Aftermath of Shadows. The first light of dawn crept through the trees as Evelyn stepped back into Hawkins. The familiar landscape was now eerily silent, the air thick with an unsettling stillness. The town had changed, the usual morning hustle replaced by an oppressive quiet that seemed to seep into every corner. Evelyn's steps were heavy, each one echoing the weight of what she had endured. Her clothes were torn, and her face was streaked with dirt and sweat. Her mind, however, was even more battered, grappling with the enormity of their sacrifice. The Upside Down was no more, but its darkness had left its mark on her, both physically and emotionally. As she wandered through the streets, Evelyn began to notice subtle but significant changes in herself. Her senses were heightened, her perception of the world around her tinged with an eerie awareness. She could feel a lingering presence, an echo of the power she had fought so hard to contain. "What's happening to me?" she muttered, her voice trembling with fear and confusion. She found her way to her father's old house, the place where it all began. The house was now abandoned and overgrown, a ghostly reminder of the life she had lost. As she approached, she noticed a strange sensation, like a whispering current flowing through her veins. Inside, she discovered a letter that had been left for her, penned in her father's familiar handwriting. The letter was dated just before his death, revealing a final, devastating truth. "Dear Evelyn," it began, "if you're reading this, then my fears have come true. The heart of darkness was only one part of a greater threat. The power of the Upside Down is not gone. It now resides within you. You have become a vessel for its energy, a beacon for what's to come. Beware, for the true enemy is still out there, waiting for the right moment to strike." Evelyn's hands shook as she read the letter. The realization that she now harbored a fragment of the Upside Down's power within her was both frightening and confusing. Her father's warning about the true enemy left her with a gnawing sense of dread. The letter concluded with a final, haunting message. "You must remain vigilant. The shadows are not finished with you yet." As Evelyn absorbed the weight of the letter, a sudden, sharp pain shot through her head. She stumbled, clutching her temples, as dark visions flashed before her eyes. She saw fragments of otherworldly landscapes, shadowy figures, and fleeting glimpses of an unknown threat lurking just beyond the edge of perception. Suddenly, a chill ran down her spine. She looked around and noticed Lucas was nowhere to be found. He had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a cryptic message etched into the ground where he had last stood. "The darkness is not done," the message read. "Prepare yourself for what lies ahead." Evelyn's heart sank as she realized the gravity of the situation. Lucas's disappearance and the ominous warning left her feeling isolated and unprepared. She was now left to navigate a world forever altered by the darkness she had fought to contain. Determined to understand her new reality and protect those she cared about, Evelyn walked through the town with a newfound resolve. Hawkins was forever changed, its streets haunted by the echoes of their battle. Shadows seemed to linger in every corner, a constant reminder of the darkness that had touched their lives. With each step, Evelyn felt the weight of her actions and the power that now resided within her. She knew that the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was determined to face whatever came next. The true enemy remained unknown, but she would be ready. Evelyn looked out over the town, its familiar buildings now cast in an eerie, otherworldly light. The shadows of the past had left their mark, and the future was shrouded in uncertainty. As she took a deep breath, she resolved to confront the darkness within and without, knowing that her journey was far from over. The shadows of the past may haunt us, Evelyn thought, but it is our strength and resolve that will define our future. Part 8. The Whisper of a New Dawn. Evelyn stood before the dilapidated house that had once been her home, the weight of her father's letter heavy in her hands. The town of Hawkins was beginning to rebuild, its residents slowly returning to their lives, but a sense of unease still lingered in the air. The streets, though quieter, were still marked by the scars of their battle. She had spent days combing through the remnants of her father's belongings, seeking answers, trying to understand her new reality. The letter had revealed a chilling truth, one that would shape her path forward. As she entered the house, her footsteps echoed through the empty rooms, each creak a reminder of the past. In the corner of the old study, hidden among a stack of dusty papers, Evelyn found one final letter from her father. She carefully unfolded it, her hands trembling as she read the familiar handwriting. "Evelyn," it began, "if you're reading this, it means you have faced the darkness with unparalleled bravery. But know this, the battle is not over. There is a symbol hidden within these pages, a portal still open. The threat we faced is far from extinguished. The Upside Down's influence endures, and a new menace stirs in the shadows. You must find and close this portal before it is too late." The letter was accompanied by a cryptic drawing, a symbol of a portal, glowing with an ominous light. Evelyn's heart raced as she examined the symbol, recognizing the eerie resemblance to the portal she had seen before. The gravity of her father's message hit her like a thunderclap. The danger was not over. It was merely evolving. The Upside Down was still reaching into their world, and a new threat was beginning to manifest. Evelyn's gaze drifted outside, where the first hints of twilight were beginning to appear. The sky was streaked with shades of dark gray and black, clouds forming ominous patterns on the horizon. The atmosphere was thick with tension, as if the very air was holding its breath. "It's not over," she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "I need to find this portal and close it." As she walked through the streets of Hawkins, she could sense the change in the environment. The town's attempts to rebuild seemed to be overshadowed by an invisible, looming threat. The once familiar landscape now felt alien and fraught with hidden dangers. Evelyn paused at the edge of town, looking out at the darkening sky. The clouds continued to gather, swirling ominously. A chill wind swept through the streets, carrying with it a whisper of something dark and foreboding. She knew that her journey was far from over. The shadows that had once been confined to the Upside Down were now stirring, their influence seeping into their world once again. She took a deep breath, her resolve firm. Her new reality was one of constant vigilance, a life forever changed by the darkness she had fought. The symbol from her father's letter was a beacon guiding her toward a new mission, a new challenge. Evelyn looked towards the horizon, where the clouds churned with dark energy. The promise of a new threat loomed, a reminder that the shadows were never truly vanquished. And in the silence of the night, the shadows whispered her name once more, promising a darkness she could never escape. As the night fell and the first stars began to appear, Evelyn steeled herself for the journey ahead. The dawn of a new chapter was upon her, one that would test her strength and courage in ways she could not yet imagine. The darkness deepens. In part 2 of our spine-chilling saga, Evelyn Parker faces unimaginable dangers as she uncovers more about the sinister forces at play. Just when it seems like there's a glimmer of hope, the shadows close in tighter, and new secrets come to light. Will Evelyn and Lucas be able to navigate the labyrinth of fear and confront the true horrors lurking in Hawkins? Don't miss a moment of the suspense. Crystal Ball. Hit like if you're hooked and subscribe to stay on this terrifying journey with Evelyn and Lucas. Your support keeps the story unfolding. Make sure you're here for every twist and turn. Turn on notifications so you're the first to know when the next part drops. The darkness awaits. ***.